The night was quiet except for the sound of wind brushing across the open fields. The stars hung low over the ranch, glowing faintly above the endless stretch of land. A single lantern flickered on the porch, its light catching the edges of two faces, hers and his. She stood there, hands trembling slightly, her eyes locked on the man in front of her. He didn't move. He just watched her, calm as the earth beneath them. Her voice broke the silence first, soft but steady, like she had rehearsed it 100 times before. "You'll regret choosing me," she whispered. The words carried more weight than she wanted them to. They weren't meant to hurt, only to protect. Her eyes dropped to the ground. She meant every syllable. She'd seen what happened to people who tried to love her. They always ended up wishing they hadn't. For a moment, the only sound was the creak of the wooden boards under his boots. Then slowly, he smiled. Not a grin or a smirk, but something gentler, something that reached his eyes. "I already regret waiting this long," he said quietly. His tone wasn't sharp or proud. It was steady, filled with the kind of certainty that comes from years of knowing exactly what you want. Her breath caught. No one had ever answered her like that before. There was no hesitation in his voice, no fear of what she might bring, just truth. The kind that sank deep. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the shadows of her own doubts, but his words pinned her there, right in the warmth of that porch light. He took one slow step forward, his boots brushing against the dust. "You think you're trouble," he said, his voice soft but sure. "You think you'll ruin everything you touch, but I've been waiting for you longer than you've been running." The air between them felt heavier now, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. She didn't know if it was hope or danger. Maybe both. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The lantern flickered once, then steadied again, the flame holding on like it refused to give in to the dark. The morning light spilled over the open land, washing the ranch in a pale golden glow. The world felt still, but inside her chest, everything was chaos. She stood at the edge of the field, her fingers tangled together, watching him saddle his horse. The sight should have been ordinary, but it wasn't. Something about the way he moved, calm, measured, confident, made it harder to breathe. He had always carried himself like the land itself, steady, patient, and strong. She wasn't sure whether that comforted her or frightened her. He noticed her standing there but didn't speak right away. That was his way, never rushing what didn't need to be rushed. He pulled the strap tight on the saddle, then looked up. "You didn't sleep," he said, not as a question but as a quiet truth. She didn't answer. The truth wasn't something she wanted to share. She hadn't slept because her mind had been replaying his words all night. "I already regret waiting this long." The way he said it, like it was nothing and everything at once, had shaken something inside her. It wasn't what she was used to. She was used to people walking away when things got hard. He didn't seem like the kind who ran. The ranch stretched out around them, wide and endless, dotted with fences that looked like they'd been standing for 100 years. Beyond the field, the hills rolled softly into the horizon. It was the kind of place where silence had its own voice. She'd always loved quiet places, but this one had started to make her uneasy. Quiet left room for her thoughts, and her thoughts weren't kind. He walked toward her, brushing the dust off his gloves. "You're still thinking about what you said," he said with a faint smile. "You think I don't know what I'm getting into." She turned away. "You don't," she said quietly. "You can't." He stopped beside her, not too close but near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I do." Her jaw tightened. "You think I'm something you can fix. I'm not." He didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to fix you." His voice softened. "I'm just trying to stand beside you." The words hit harder than she expected. For a moment she forgot to breathe. She had built her walls carefully over the years, brick by brick, to keep everyone out. But now she felt cracks forming, small, dangerous cracks that let the light in. She didn't want to admit how badly she needed that light. He leaned against the fence, watching the sky stretch into blue. "You ever notice," he said, "how the land keeps giving even after it's been burned?" She frowned. "That's different." "Maybe not," he replied. "Sometimes what's broken still grows back stronger." She didn't answer. Words had always been dangerous for her. Every time she let someone close, they used her past against her. Every mistake became a reason to leave. He didn't seem like he'd run, but she couldn't believe that, not yet. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because she didn't know what else to do. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know what I've done." He looked at her then, really looked. His eyes were steady, not searching for perfection, just truth. "I don't need to," he said. "I know who you are now." The simplicity of his answer unsettled her. No one had ever accepted her as she was, not without conditions, not without judgment. She wanted to push him away, to say something sharp enough to make him retreat. But instead she found herself whispering, "Why me?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made his eyes soften. "Because you're the one I waited for." The wind fell silent. The world seemed to pause, leaving only the sound of his voice lingering in the air. She looked at him, searching for a lie, but found none. There was only honesty, plain and quiet. She turned back toward the horizon, blinking against the brightness. Part of her wanted to believe him. Another part, the larger, louder part, told her not to. Trusting him meant tearing down walls she'd spent years building. But when he said her name, gently, like it was something sacred, she felt those walls shake again. And for the first time in years, she didn't step back. The days that followed passed quietly, but beneath that calm, something was shifting. Every morning, she found him already outside, working before the sun had fully climbed the horizon. He moved through the fields with the patience of someone who had long ago made peace with silence. She tried to keep her distance, telling herself it was better that way. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore how naturally he belonged to the world around him, how the horses seemed to trust him, how the land seemed to listen when he spoke. She watched him from the porch sometimes, her fingers curled around a chipped coffee cup. He didn't look her way often, but when he did, his eyes carried the same warmth they always had, steady, kind, unshaken. It made her uneasy. She wasn't used to kindness without expectation. She wasn't sure what to do with it. He'd offered her a place there, said she could stay as long as she needed. She hadn't planned on accepting, but somehow she did. The first few nights, she barely slept, afraid that comfort was something temporary. She told herself she'd leave soon. But then the mornings came, soft light spilling over the plains, the smell of coffee drifting through the small kitchen, and she stayed a little longer each time. The ranch wasn't just his home. It was his way of living. He spoke to the horses like they understood him, and somehow they seemed to. When he talked to her, he did it the same way, without pushing, without demand. It made her feel both safe and terrified. She had spent so long believing love was something that burned, something that took more than it gave. He was teaching her it could be quiet. One afternoon, while he fixed a fence post, she walked over with a jug of water. The sun was high, the heat rising from the earth in shimmering waves. He looked up when she approached, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "You don't have to keep bringing me things," he said. "I know," she replied, handing him the jug anyway. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, just lightly, but enough to send a strange warmth through her chest. He didn't look away, and for a moment, neither did she. Then she stepped back quickly, pretending to adjust her sleeve. "You should take a break," she muttered. He smiled faintly. "You worry more than you think you do." "I don't," she said, too fast. He chuckled softly, the sound low and familiar. "You do," he said again, his tone light but certain. She turned away, but she couldn't hide the small curve that pulled at her lips. It had been years since someone noticed the parts of her she didn't show. Later that evening, when the day was done and the sky had turned to gold, she found him sitting on the porch steps. The sun painted everything in soft light, and for once she didn't feel like a stranger there. She sat beside him, their shoulders not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth from his arm. He didn't speak right away. He never rushed silence. When he finally did, his voice was gentle. "You still think I'll regret this?" She didn't answer at first. The question caught her off guard. "You don't even know what you're asking for," she said finally. He looked out at the horizon. "I think I do." "You think you can handle what comes with me?" she asked quietly. "Because it's not easy." He turned to her then, his gaze steady. "I don't need easy," he said. "I just need honest." The words sank deep, settling in places she hadn't let anyone reach before. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that love wasn't that simple, but his voice carried such calm conviction that it left no room for argument. The sky darkened, stars beginning to appear one by one. Crickets filled the silence with their slow rhythm. She leaned back on her hands, staring up at the first faint glow of the moon. "You make it sound like waiting was worth it," she said, half a whisper. He smiled to himself, the corners of his mouth barely moving. "It was," he said, "every day of it." Something in her chest twisted. He said it so plainly, like it wasn't even a question. She wanted to ask why her, why now, but she was afraid of the answer. Instead, she closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the night, the wind moving through the grass, the soft snort of horses in the distance, his quiet breathing beside her. When she opened her eyes again, he was still looking at the stars. The faint lines on his face softened in the dim light, and for the first time, she saw the loneliness in him, the kind that comes from waiting too long for something you're not sure will ever arrive. She felt her throat tighten. "You really waited," he nodded. "I told you," he said. "I already regret waiting this long." Her breath caught at the echo of his words from that night, the same ones that had haunted her since. But hearing them now in the stillness of the open land, they didn't sound like a confession. They sounded like a promise. The lantern beside them flickered, its light bending and swaying in the breeze. She could feel her walls shaking again, piece by piece. Every instinct told her to rebuild them, to protect what little of herself she had left. But as she looked at him, steady, unafraid, and completely sincere, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was quiet, like the hum of the night air. It was the kind of peace that came from being seen and not having to run from it. She didn't know if it would last. She didn't know if she could ever give him what he deserved. But for the first time, she didn't try to push him away. She just sat there beside him, letting the silence speak for her. The ranch stretched endlessly before them, and though neither of them said it out loud, they both knew something had changed. The space between them wasn't filled with fear anymore. It was filled with something new, something fragile but real, something worth holding on to, even if they didn't yet have the words for it. The wind carried the scent of rain across the open fields that afternoon. The sky was a mix of gray and gold, clouds rolling low and heavy above the horizon. She stood by the barn door, watching him work. The way he moved, unhurried yet sure, drew her in every time. There was something steady about him, something she couldn't decide if she wanted to trust or run from. He had been fixing the gate since morning. She'd offered to help, but he only smiled, told her he had it handled. Still, she stayed nearby, pretending to busy herself with little tasks, sweeping dust from the porch, folding laundry that didn't need folding. She told herself it was just coincidence that she ended up near him, again and again. But even she didn't believe that anymore. When the first drops of rain began to fall, he looked up. "Looks like the storm's coming early," he said. She nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "You should come inside before it gets worse." He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her for a long second, like he was trying to read something she hadn't said. Then he gave a quiet nod and set his tools down. Inside the barn, the sound of rain on the roof grew louder, rhythmic and constant. He leaned against one of the wooden beams, his hat tipped back, eyes following the drops sliding down the open doorway. She stood near the window, hands clasped together. Neither spoke for a while. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, alive, waiting for something to break it. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "I don't understand you," he glanced her way. "What's there to understand?" "You're not afraid," she said. "Not of me, not of what might happen. You should be." He smiled slightly, but there was no amusement in it. "Fear doesn't stop what's meant to be." She shook her head, frustrated. "You talk like life's that simple." "It's not," he said softly, "but sometimes people are." The rain came harder now, drumming against the roof. Her heart thudded to match it. "You think you can just choose me," she said, her words trembling. "Like it's easy." He pushed off the beam, taking a slow step toward her. "I don't think it's easy," he said. "I think it's right." His closeness made her breath hitch. She could feel the warmth of him, the calm that seemed to follow wherever he went. It unsettled her. "You don't know what you're saying." He met her eyes. "I know exactly what I'm saying." She looked away, her fingers curling tightly. "You don't know the things I've done." He nodded, his voice steady. "Then tell me." She froze. The words caught in her throat. He waited, no pressure, no rush, just quiet patience. The rain filled the silence, and she almost let it stay that way. But something in his stillness, in the way he stood there, made her want to let go. She turned toward him, her eyes heavy with things she hadn't said in years. "I hurt people," she whispered. "Not on purpose, but I did. Every time I tried to love someone, I broke something. I told myself it was better not to try again." He listened, unmoving. When she stopped, the barn felt smaller, the air thicker. Then he said, "And you think that means you don't deserve to be loved?" She swallowed hard. "Maybe it means no one deserves the mess that comes with me." He took another step closer. "I've lived long enough to know everyone's got a mess." The words came out before she could stop them. "Why me?" He smiled softly, his eyes kind. "Because when you walked onto this land, it stopped feeling empty." The sound of thunder rolled across the sky, deep and low. She felt her chest tighten. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like she wasn't something to fix or to save, but something already whole. She turned away, blinking fast. "You make it sound easy again," she said quietly. He shook his head. "It's not easy, it's worth it." His voice was calm, but the truth in it was heavy. She didn't know how to respond. Her body wanted to run, but her heart had gone still, anchored by his words. The rain slowed, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the roof. The air smelled like wet earth and cedar. She felt him move beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Neither spoke. They just stood there, listening to the storm fade. When she finally looked up, she caught him watching her. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a quiet kind of pain, the kind that came from waiting too long for something fragile. It was then she realized his patience wasn't effortless. It cost him something every single day. She wanted to tell him she saw it now, that she understood, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached out and let her hand rest against the wooden frame beside his. It was a small gesture, almost nothing. But when he saw it, he smiled. A slow, knowing smile that carried all the words they hadn't said. Outside, the last of the rain fell in gentle drops. The fields shimmered under the fading storm, washed clean and bright. Inside the barn, the air was warm and still, and though neither of them said another word, something in that silence changed everything. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unreal. The earth smelled clean, and mist curled up from the fields as the sun climbed higher. She stood by the porch railing, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, watching him lead the horses out to graze. There was something peaceful about him in moments like this, something that made her chest ache in a way she couldn't quite name. He was steady, grounded, and every move he made carried a quiet purpose. She wondered how someone like that could ever choose someone like her. He seemed to belong to this land, to the rhythm of it, while she had spent her life running from every place that tried to hold her. But there he was, treating her as though she wasn't a mistake waiting to happen. He came back to the porch after a while, his boots muddy, hat tipped low against the sun. "Coffee still hot?" he asked, his voice light. She nodded, pouring him a cup and handing it over. Their fingers brushed, and that small touch felt louder than words. He took a sip, then leaned against the railing beside her. "You've been quiet," he said after a moment. "More than usual." She stared out at the field, the mist fading as the wind carried it away. "Just thinking," she said softly. "Dangerous habit," he said, a teasing note in his tone. She almost smiled. "I suppose you'd rather I didn't." He turned slightly toward her. "No," he said. "I'd rather know what you're thinking." That stopped her. She wasn't used to anyone asking that. People had always preferred her silence. It was easier than her truth. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. You'd regret hearing it. He didn't look away. Try me. She took a slow breath. You make it look so simple, she said. Being sure, being steady, like you've never doubted anything. He let out a quiet laugh. You think I don't doubt? You don't show it, she said. That's because I learned something a long time ago, he said. Doubt doesn't stop the work from needing to be done. She frowned slightly. That sounds exhausting, he smiled faintly. Sometimes it is, but that's life, isn't it? You keep moving until it makes sense. His words lingered. She wanted to believe them, but her past whispered louder. She thought about all the things she'd run from, all the choices she'd made that led her to this place. Every mistake had left its mark. Every goodbye had carved a scar she didn't know how to heal. She looked at him again, standing there so sure of himself, and something inside her cracked a little. You shouldn't wait for me, she said quietly. You'll end up disappointed. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. You keep saying that, he said, like you want me to believe it. I'm trying to make you see sense. He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the cup down on the railing. I see just fine, he said. You're the one who's afraid to look. His words hit harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For a long moment they stood there in silence, the only sound the soft creak of the porch and the distant call of a bird across the fields. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded handkerchief. He held it out to her. Here, he said. She frowned, confused. What's that for? For when you finally let yourself stop fighting, he said simply. You'll need it. She stared at him, torn between laughter and disbelief. You think I'm going to cry? He shrugged lightly. I think you've been holding it in long enough. Something about the way he said it, the gentleness in his voice, the lack of pity, broke through the last of her defenses. She took the handkerchief, not because she needed it, but because refusing felt impossible. Her fingers brushed his again, and she didn't pull away this time. They stood there for a while longer, watching the sky turn from gray to blue. The day felt fragile, like something too beautiful to last. But for the first time, she didn't want to run from it. She just wanted to stand there beside him, letting the quiet wrap around them both. Later that afternoon, as they worked side by side in the barn, she found herself humming softly. He looked up at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Didn't know you sang, he said. She shrugged. I don't, not really. He smiled. You should. She didn't answer, but she kept humming anyway. The sound filled the space between them, light and easy. For a moment she forgot about all the things that haunted her. She forgot to be careful. When evening came, the sky burned orange and red over the hills. They walked back to the house together, their steps slow, unhurried. She could feel the weight of everything unsaid between them, but it didn't scare her anymore. It felt real. As they reached the porch, he stopped and turned to her. You still think I'll regret choosing you? He asked quietly. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any trace of doubt. There was none, only the same calm certainty that had been there from the start. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe I was wrong, he smiled, that same quiet, patient smile that always seemed to find her in the dark. Maybe you were, he said. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving only a soft, golden glow across the land. The air was warm, heavy with the smell of rain and earth. She stood there, the world silent around them, and for the first time in a long time she didn't feel like she was running anymore. The air that morning was cool and clear, the kind of morning that carried the scent of fresh rain and wild grass. She woke before sunrise, the soft light spilling through the window and painting the walls in pale gold. For a long time she just lay there, listening to the quiet hum of the ranch coming to life, the creak of the windmill, the faint snort of a horse, the distant sound of boots on gravel. It was strange how peaceful it all felt, how her body no longer tensed at every sound. She sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Through the window, she could see him out by the stables, moving with that same unhurried ease he always had. He had a way of fitting into the world like he'd been carved out of it, like every motion he made belonged exactly where it was. Watching him, she felt a pull in her chest she couldn't name. It was heavy, but not in the way pain used to be. It was something warmer, something that scared her even more. When she stepped outside, the cold kissed her skin, and the sky was a watercolor of pink and soft orange. He looked up when he saw her, smiling beneath the brim of his hat. "Didn't think you were an early riser," he said. "I wasn't," she said, her voice still rough from sleep. "Guess I'm learning." He chuckled softly, patting the neck of the horse beside him. "This land will do that to you, teaches you to meet the day before it gets too far ahead." She crossed her arms, leaning against the fence. "You talk like the land's a person." He glanced at her. "Some days I think it is." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. The sky brightened, and she found herself watching the way the light touched his face. There was something steady about him, something that made her want to believe in simple things again. She didn't say that out loud. She just watched him work, each movement careful and deliberate. After a while, he spoke again. "You know," he said, "I used to think peace was something you had to go looking for. Turns out it's just something you stop running from." Her fingers tightened around the wooden fence. His words landed gently, but they stirred something deep inside her. "You make it sound easy," she said. He smiled faintly. "Doesn't mean it is." She looked out at the land stretching before them, endless fields kissed by morning light, the horizon disappearing into soft mist. "You ever wish things were different?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment before answering. "I used to," he said. "But then I realized the things I wanted were already here. Just took me a while to see 'em." She nodded slowly, trying to take in the weight of what he said. It was hard for her to understand how someone could live without regret, without the heavy ache of all the things left behind. But standing there beside him, she started to wonder if maybe regret wasn't meant to be carried forever. Maybe some of it was meant to fade. The day unfolded slowly. They spent the morning tending to the animals, side by side, working in quiet rhythm. Every now and then, he'd glance her way, offering a small smile or a teasing remark that made her roll her eyes but hide a laugh. It was strange how natural it all felt, how easily her heart seemed to fall into step with his. When the sun was high, they took a break by the porch. He poured her a glass of lemonade, the kind that tasted faintly of sugar and sun. "You look like you're thinking again," he said, sitting beside her. "I think too much," she replied. He leaned back, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe, but that's how you figure out what you want." She glanced at him, her voice softer now. "And what if what I want is too late?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Then it means it's right on time." The words caught her off guard. She didn't answer. She just looked away, her heart twisting. The simplicity of his belief unsettled her. It was too good, too steady. But maybe, for once, she didn't have to question it. As the afternoon wore on, the air turned warm and shadows stretched long across the fields. The children from the neighboring ranch passed by on horseback, laughing as they raced along the fence line. She smiled without realizing it, the sound of their laughter filling the open space between them. He noticed. "That's the first time I've seen you smile without trying to hide it," he said. She looked at him, caught off guard. "I didn't know I was hiding it." "You were," he said gently, "but not anymore." The honesty in his tone made her chest tighten. She wanted to tell him how much that scared her, how every time she let herself feel happy, life had found a way to take it back. But before she could speak, he reached over, resting his hand over hers. The touch was light, but it anchored her like nothing else could. "You don't have to earn this," he said quietly. "You just have to let it be." The air between them went still. She felt her throat tighten, her breath catching in her chest. He didn't look away, didn't say another word. He just stayed there, letting the silence do what words never could. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose, she realized the day had passed without her noticing. For the first time in years, she hadn't been counting hours or mistakes. She hadn't been thinking about the past or worrying about what might come next. She'd simply existed, right there beside him in that fragile, perfect moment. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew something had shifted inside her. The fear that once controlled her had grown quieter, replaced by something unfamiliar but steady. She didn't know if it was love or peace or something in between. All she knew was that it felt real. The ranch was quiet again as the light faded, and the stars began to appear one by one. He stood, tipping his hat toward her before heading toward the barn. "Don't stay out too long," he said. "Nights get cold around here." She watched him go, her heart calm in a way she hadn't felt in years. She looked up at the wide sky above her, the stars scattered like promises, and for once she didn't feel like she had to run from them. The world had finally stopped spinning, and in the stillness, she found herself standing exactly where she was meant to be.